Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nanda Braja Jadara Yashoda Nana Braja Janaranjana Unatira Manachari Yamunatira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Oh, I'm totally jumping ahead to Om Jnana. Sorry. Oh, my Lord, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. See, it just proves I was born in the darkest of ignorance because I'm jumping way ahead and totally lost in this material pool. Okay, so Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Naranarayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay. So let's see. Just hold on. So today we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, texts 11 and 12. Anye Chadevarshi Brahmarshi Varya. Anye Chadevarshi Brahmarshi Varya. Rajarshi Varya Arunadayascha. Rajarshi Varya Arunadayascha. Nanarshaya Pravadans. Wait. Nanarshaya Pravadan Sametan. Doesn't match the meter. Abhyarchyat Raja Shirdashava Vande. Okay. Anyecha Devarshi Brahmarshi Varya. Rajarshi Varya Arunadayascha. Nanarshaya Pravadan Sametan. Abhyarchya Raja Shirdashava Vande. Okay, synonyms together. Anye, many others. Cha, also. Devarshi, saintly demigods. Brahmarshi, saintly brahmanas. Varya, topmost. Rajarshi Varya, topmost saintly kings. Aruna Adaya, a special rank of Rajarshis. Cha, and. Nana, many others. Arsheya Pravaran, chief amongst the dynasties of the sages. Sametan, assembled together. Abhyarchya, by worshipping. Raja, the emperor. Shirasha, bowed his head to the ground. Bhavande, welcomed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There were also many other saintly demigods, kings, and special royal orders called Arunadayas, a special rank of Rajarshis, from different dynasties of sages. When they all assembled together to meet the emperor, Parikshit, he received them properly and bowed his head to the ground. Purport. The system of bowing the head to the ground to show respect to superiors is an excellent etiquette which obliges the honored guest deep into the heart. Even the first-grade offender is excused simply by this process. And Maharaj Parikshit, although honored by all the rishis and kings, welcomed all the big men in that humble etiquette in order to be excused from any offenses. Generally, at the last stage of one's life, this humble method is adopted by every sensible man in order to be excused before departure. We're going back home, back to Godhead. Okay, so it says my internet connection is unstable. Is anybody who's on Zoom still able to hear?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Okay, just a quick point before we go on to the next verse. This second to last sentence, the penultimate sentence. Generally, at the last stage of one's life, this humble method is adopted by every sensible man in order to be excused before departure. So if you learn about Prabhupada's departure and all the events that happened leading up to his departure, you'll see that Prabhupada did the same thing at the last stage of his um, time in this world, in that body. He was offering apologies to his god brothers and anyone he may have offended. He was asking them all to be excused for any of his offenses. So he went through this process at the last stage of his life. So he's saying every sensible man does this in order to be excused. So obviously Prabhupada was a sensible man and pure devotee. So he made sure and he said that he would explain that sometimes uh, in the course of carrying out our duties, we may make offenses or we may say things that sound, that come across as heavy, or we're heavy with each other, but he hoped that he could be forgiven for any offenses that he committed. So, and also we can see Prabhupada in the last stages of his life was so completely aware and conscious of everything. He was still translating towards the end, even though the devotees, when Prabhupada was in bed, they would just hold the microphone up to his mouth and he would just, they would read the verse to him and he would translate and give his purport. So even up to the last moment, he was fully aware and fully with his wits, as they say. So if we spend our life identifying with our real identity as the soul, then at the time of death or time of passing on, or leaving our body, we're not identifying with the body as much. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I've seen a couple of people go through the process of leaving their body. And for one person, she went through a lot of difficulty, a lot of holding on to the body. She was given some bad advice by somebody, and she was really holding on, and she suffered so much because of it. And she stayed in a body that wasn't really functioning anymore for so long because she didn't want to let it go. But then the devotees came and they were reading and chanting and just helping her move along. And then she was able to finally let go and move on. And I saw another devotee who moved along very quickly. I'm sure there was some discomfort because she had cancer, but she moved along very quickly because she accepted it. She accepted that it was time to go. And because she accepted it, just within weeks, she left. And the devotees, of course, were all there also chanting and everything. Her husband had put pictures all over the room of Krishna, Radha and Krishna, and different pictures. And even on the ceiling, he said he put pictures so that when she was laying in bed, she can see. So this is our duty, even as if we're in, doesn't matter which ashram we're in, whether we're in the Grihastha ashram or Brahmachari ashram or whatever sannyas, our duty is to help each other go back to Godhead. So even though she and her husband, where they had just, she was young, she was maybe in 30. They had just made plans to start a family, and then she found out she had cancer. So they just sat and discussed. They had told her that she could try to get some treatment, but the only thing it would do would extend her life a little bit, but it would decrease the quality of her life. So she just decided to stay with decent quality and go back to Godhead. And so that's the duty, no matter what, we have to be prepared. So here she was in this consciousness of, okay, we're moving on to the next phase of our life. We're going to start a family. And then she had to switch gears, and her husband talked about it, and they just decided to go full blast, helping her go back to Godhead. So that's what they did. And so her husband carried out his duty of helping her go back to Godhead. She carried out her duty of just switching her mind to that, the last stage of life. So it was a very, very auspicious departure. And she just got her mind on board with it. So we're in this body and we're using it in Krishna's service. And we use it up to the point where Krishna decides we don't need to use it anymore, right? We use it up to that point to the best of our ability to serve the best way we can, to keep all of our activities, no matter what we do, with the object of trying to reconnect with Krishna, trying to serve Krishna, trying to serve the Vaishnavas. And then when it's time to go, just like Maharaj Parikshit, it was time to go. He just decided, okay, let me detach, let me go to this sacred river and just find out the best way to leave my body. So we're going to see what steps he takes next in the next verse. Sukhopavishte te shubuya krita pranama swachikir yat vigyapayama shavivika cheta upashtito gre vigrihita pani. After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them of his decision to fast until death. I have a hard time fasting till noon. He's going to fast for 7 days. Because, well, okay, this does bring up a good point, is that what does Maharaj Parikshit do with his time instead of eating? I'm actually going to put that question out there for those of you on Zoom or Karuna Prabhu. Like, what does he do with his time instead of eating?
Hearing, right, Prabhu?
What's that?
We just want to hear about Krishna, Bhagavatam.
Yeah, he's not going to take a break to eat. He's just going to hear, right? So the purpose of fasting, every single festival that we fast for, the purpose of fasting is so that we have more time for hearing and chanting. That's the purpose of it, right? So we don't want to, I think, again, we've talked about this before, but I've seen over the years, usually with younger devotees or newer devotees, is that they say, well, like I've heard people say, take a nap to make the time go by faster, right? So they're fasting, and they're fasting just for the sake of fasting, right? They just say, well, we're not supposed to eat, so I'm not going to eat. So what's the best way to make it go by really quickly so that like it's time to eat? And so they may take a nap or distract themselves with something. But the idea is that instead of spending time cooking or sitting and eating and things like that, we spend that extra time doing a little extra hearing and chanting. So that's the purpose of it. And of course, if one, especially when people are new, if one has trouble with that, if they say, okay, I've never fasted in my entire life. And to me, it's just my body's just going to revolt against it. And you see people get really bad headaches. And I always recommend drinking water, because especially when the fast is in the summer, because when you don't drink water in the summer and you get dehydrated, you can get a really, really bad headache. And if you get that headache, it starts to become more and more difficult to do devotional service. So when we fast, we want to do, the idea is to do extra hearing and chanting. So we do the minimal possible. So if I say, well, I have no problem going the whole day fasting from food and water and doing all of my service and reading and chanting, that's great. If you say, well, I have to drink some water because I get a migraine if I don't drink water, then drink water and do your service and your hearing and chanting. If someone else says, well, if I don't eat, I get really low blood sugar. If I get low blood sugar, I start to pass out. then eat something, eat a little something, and then get on with your hearing and chanting. So Rupa Goswami says that the purpose of all the rules and regulations is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. And all the other rules are servants of that rule. He said, like servants following a queen. You have that queen, the queen rule, and their servants are following that queen rule. And so everything we do, it should be for the sake of always remembering Krishna. And everything we avoid or don't do should be for the sake of never forgetting Krishna. So we want to always keep that goal in mind. But here is Maharaj Parikshit. He's ready to fast until death. And he, of course, we know he does that. So I didn't read the purport yet, right? Okay, purport. Although the king had already decided to fast until death on the bank of the Ganges, he humbly expressed his decision to elicit the opinions of the great authorities present there. Any important decision, however firmly fixed, should be confirmed by some authority. That makes the matter perfect. This means that the monarchs who ruled the earth in those days were not irresponsible dictators. They scrupulously followed the authoritative decisions of the saints and sages in terms of Vedic injunction. Maharaj Parikshit, as a perfect king, followed the principles by consulting the authorities even up to the last days of his life. So we know that we have this varnashram system, and we have different varnas and ashrams, and they have different duties, right? And the duties of those different varnas and ashrams are based on a person's guna and karma, their the modes that they're in, and the type of work that they do. And so Kshatriyas, they are functioning mostly in the mode of passion. They don't have to be. You have like a pure devotee like Arjuna, for example, who just fights the battle simply for the sake of Krishna. And we have Maharaj Parikshit, who's a great Rajarshi. He's a great devotee also. But we see that the Kshatriyas function mostly in the mode of passion. And so when they are doing their duty, in the course of their duty, that passion may get out of control. Right? It may spin out of control. It may go too far. So there's an example in the Bhagavatam of a king who just went too far. Well, there's, I think, more than one, but one I'm thinking of in particular, where the king just went too far and someone superior to him had to come and advise him to stop. And that was Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj, after his brother got killed by a yaksha, he went to kill the yakshas wholesale, right? So he went and found them, and they were at first creating some illusions for him, and then he did some achman, and he had his special arrows, and the illusion dissipated that they had created, so he was able to fight. But once he started fighting, it was like the snowball effect. He just kept killing and killing and killing the yakshas. So his was it Swayambhuva Manu came and told him, I'm going to read a few verses from that. He came and stopped him. So what Prabhupada's saying here is that the monarchs who ruled the earth in those days were not irresponsible dictators, right? Because what if we think about what a dictator is? What is their motivation? What is their main goal, and what's their motivation? I'm going to put this question out there. What's their main goal? What's the motivation of a dictator? What is it that they want? Anyone on Zoom?
Control.
Yeah, control. What kind of control? How much?
Like kind of everything.
Yeah, absolute control, right? They don't want to be told anything by anybody. They just go in to they have their position as a leader. I would loosely call them a leader, because a leader leads people. A dictator just suppresses people, right? So all the dictator basically wants is to be God. And they have exactly the opposite qualities of God. God who gives us free will, God who, guides us. They do the opposite. They just oppress people. And oftentimes you can see different, if you study dictators in history, they all kind of have the same there's the same circumstances surrounding their rise to power, similar circumstances, and they have a similar insecurity, right? They're very insecure. It's like they want to show their power by putting people down, by killing people, because they're very insecure and paranoid. So sometimes when dictators come into power, they just kill, like they'll just start killing people who are actually serving them because they're paranoid that those people will try to take their position, right? So they have no they have no security in their own position, um, very low self-esteem, though it may look like they're very arrogant. And so arrogance is often a sign of low self-esteem, right? Somebody has to boost themselves up. They have to put others down because they feel beneath them to begin with. So they got to climb up on top of them and push them down. So that's what dictators do. And so of course, they're not going to take counsel from anybody. You see, kings in history like Henry VIII, who decided that he didn't want to follow the Pope, right? He wanted to keep divorcing his wives until he got a son. And so he kept getting rid of them. And in order to get divorced from his first wife, um, he separated England from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England. And so he did that just so he could get divorced. He didn't want to follow their advice. He didn't want to say, you're telling me that there's no such thing as divorce, but I want to get divorced. So I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to create my own church. Right. So this is these kings in the past, if you look at history. Now you see Dhruva Maharaj's, if we look at Dhruva Maharaj's case, we can see that if Swayambhuva Manu hadn't come and stopped him, then he would very much was getting carried away with what's considered a sinful activity. He was killing yakshas who had nothing to do with his brother's death. So Swayambhuva Manu comes and he says to Dhruva, this isn't, by the way, if anyone wants to read this story, this is the fourth canto, chapter 11. And this is, well, you could even go back further in the story, but actually just read the whole Bhagavatam. But if you want to read this story for the day, it's the 411. So he says, Swayambhuva Manu says, it's his, Dhruva Maharaj is Swayambhuva Manu's grandson. I'm just saying that because in this verse he says, my dear son. My dear son, please stop. It is not good to become unnecessarily angry. It is the path to hellish life. Now you are going beyond the limit by killing yakshas who are actually not offenders. My dear son, the killing of the sinless yakshas which you have undertaken is not at all approved by authorities, and it does not befit our family, which is supposed to know the laws of religion and irreligion. So we see that we don't just need to know what religion is. We also need to know what irreligion is because we need to be able to identify it and not follow it. And we need to identify religion so we can follow it. So we need to know both. My dear son, it has been proved that you are very much affectionate towards your brother and are greatly aggrieved at his being killed by the yakshas. But just consider, for one yaksha's offense, you have killed many others who are innocent. And then he goes on to preach to him, basically, one should not accept the body as the self, and thus, like the animals, kill the bodies of others. This is especially forbidden by saintly persons who follow the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even Dhruva Maharaj, who's a devotee, had to be stopped. He was in that mode of a Kshatriya, fighting very fiercely. And someone had to come in and he listened, of course, because that was the etiquette. So we could see that when somebody in functioning in a varna in the mode of passion or ignorance doesn't want to take the advice of someone functioning in the mode of sattva or vishuddha sattva, then all hell breaks loose. Things become degraded. People spiral down and into a dictatorship, or they make decisions based on anger, envy, greed, and things like that, vices like that. So we can also see, so not only do these different varnas follow the advice of the brahmanas, the rishis, the sages, we can also see that when someone, even a brahmana, sage, or a pure devotee, when they're undertaking some spiritual endeavor, they look for the blessings from superiors, right? So that's a Mangala Charanam. You want to invoke auspiciousness and seek blessings. That's what a Mangala Charanam is. And so, like, for example, when someone's writing something, writing a book about spiritual topics, they offer obeisances to the Lord, to their guru, and to all of the Vaishnavas. And then they invoke benediction. So we have examples of that. 1 second. And the Nectar of Devotion, the Nectar of Devotion is Prabhupada's summary study. It's his translation of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu written by Rupa Goswami. And in the beginning, he explains, he starts off with, in the introduction, invoking auspiciousness, right? So that's what we're doing. We're invoking auspiciousness. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the reservoir of all rasas or relationships, which are called neutrality, passive adoration. He goes on to go through all the rasas and just continue to explain Lord Krishna. And then he's captivated by the gopis and especially Srimati Radharani. And then he says, let his lordship's grace be on us so that there may not be any hindrance in the execution. So he says, so here he is offering obeisances to the Lord, right? Let his lordship's grace be on us so that there may not be any hindrance in the execution of this duty of writing the nectar of devotion, impelled by his divine grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. And so Prabhupada goes on, this is his invocation for writing the nectar of devotion. He offers brief obeisances to Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Siddhanta, and so on. So, and then he goes on again to the devotees. Let us offer our respectful obeisances to all the great devotees and acharyas who are compared to the sharks in the great ocean of nectar and who do not care for the various rivers of liberation. So Prabhupada is doing his Mangala Charanam, and then Rupa Goswami, he's talking about Rupa Goswami's. He says Rupa Goswami prays to his spiritual master, Srila Sanatana Goswami, for the protection of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the ocean of the pure nectar of devotional service, from the argumentative logicians who unnecessarily meddle in the science of service to the Lord. And then he says Rupa Goswami very humbly submits that he's just trying to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, although he humbly thinks himself unfit for this work. That should be the attitude of all preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement, following in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami. And then Prabhupada says this, and we see this again in this purport, that he's saying that even though the king already made a decision, he's still appealing to the sages there that whatever he's doing, it should be confirmed and so on. So Prabhupada says, we should never think ourselves as great preachers, but should always consider that we are simply instrumental to the previous acharyas, and simply by following in their footsteps, we may be able to do something for the benefit of suffering humanity. So all of these endeavors, we have to remember what our endeavors are for. If we're going out to preach, if we're writing something, Prabhupada encouraged devotees to write books about Krishna consciousness. We should see ourselves as instruments, and we should offer these obeisances to the Lord, to the Guru, to the Vaishnava, right? We always do our Vanchakalpa Triviyascha, and ask for benediction. So we see the same thing, of course, Prabhupada does in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. He does the Mangala Charanam that we all know. Om Vijnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya. And then Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam. So he gives that translation of each verse in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. Let's see. offering obeisances to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and unto the feet of all the Vaishnavas, the feet of Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. Raghunath just goes through the Goswamis, Lord Krishna, Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and so on, all the associates. Hey, Krishna, Karuna, Sindhu. Oh, my dear Krishna, you are the friend of the distressed, right? So he goes through all of these prayers, and I'm just kind of touching on them. You can go into the, I know we may know always the Sanskrit of these prayers, but we may not always think about the actual translation. So for anybody who hasn't also memorized the translation, it's good to go into the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita and take a look. This is always what happens when someone begins a spiritual endeavor, whether it's like Maharaj Parikshit deciding to fast until death on the bank of a spiritual river, transcendental river, as Prabhupada says, or it's writing a book about Krishna consciousness. One should always appeal to and look for benedictions from the Lord and the Guru and the Vaishnavas, all the Vaishnavas, because we can see there's different grades of devotees that Rupa Goswami talks about, the Kanishta Adhikari, the Majjhima Adhikari, and the Uttama Adhikari. The Kanishta Adhikari, their mentality is that Krishna is only to be found in the Lord or in the deity. Once you step off the altar, Krishna's not there anymore, right? So they're called a Prakrita Bhakta, materialistic Bhakta. So there's some faith. They have some faith. It's the lowest adhikar or qualification for in their practice of devotional service. And so they have some faith and they see at least the deity they accept as Krishna. But beyond that, they don't see the Lord in everyone's heart and all living entities. And then as one makes advancement, they might at least see the Lord in the hearts of the devotees, but not everybody else. And so it kind of it's like you have this kind of little world, the spiritual world on the altar, and then everything else is Maya. And then as one makes advancement, that vision of everything being Krishna's energy and Krishna being in everyone's heart begins to spread. Your spiritual world becomes bigger and bigger. Your spiritual awareness becomes more spread. And so when somebody only sees Krishna in the deity and not in the hearts of others, they may not think to do this. They might think, why do I have to offer obeisances to all the Vaishnavas before I write a spiritual book? I know Sanskrit, I know, I'll just ask my guru or Krishna. I may even just think like, I'll just appeal to Krishna, if that. And maybe if they're a little more aware, they might say, well, my guru, I should probably ask my guru permission. But when someone's in this more pure state of consciousness, more aware, they say, yeah, no, everybody, all the Vaishnavas, Guru, the Lord, I want to appeal to all of them and ask their permission and ask for benedictions and offer them my obeisances and see myself, as Prabhupada said, just an instrument. We are just instruments to be used in Krishna's service. And so we do the best we can by first submitting to all the different groups of people, the gurus, the Lord, and the Vaishnavas, and ask for their blessings and benedictions. Okay, it's 8:32. I'll stop there. Does anyone have any points, comments, questions, realizations? Karuna, any points? No? Okay. Okay, thank you all for joining. We'll end there if no one has any points. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpachubhyascha kripasinubhyeva chaktitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.